Hello, everybody. Not so long ago, I lived in Chicago. My life in the city was really fun and vibrant, and I do miss it from time to time. I had an apartment all to myself that was spacious and beautiful, and it was in a fantastic location. It was close to public transportation, there were parks and shops nearby, and my neighbors and I had become fast friends. City and suburban friends would often come over, and I hosted dinner and movie nights. I loved sharing my home with others and being a hostess. But in the midst of this period of my life, I was single, and being single for a Libra like me was a double-edged sword. While I could do as I pleased, could travel when and where I wanted to, I was also lonely. Sometimes it was really sad coming back to my empty apartment with no one at home waiting for me, to share a meal with me, to listen to how my day was, or to just hang out and watch TV with me. So what was a single 20-something-year-old gal who loved to travel and host do? Couch surfing. Many of you probably haven't heard of couch surfing, but maybe a few of you have. Couch surfing is simple. You offer your home and hospitality to fellow travelers, and here's the crazy thing. You do it at no cost, no money exchanged whatsoever. As the couch surfing website states, couch surfing is about sharing your life, your experiences, your journey, your home, your extra almonds, or a majestic sunset. We believe that the spirit of generosity has the power to profoundly change the world. I was totally on board for this. I could open up my home, share my Chicago life with cool people from across the globe, and have company when I wanted it. I created a profile, and almost in no time, I started receiving requests to stay on my couch. My first guest was a gal traveling from Kansas to New York, looking to make a life for herself in the Big Apple. Her name was Emily, and although I have lost touch with her, she was a great first guest. We established the rules: quiet time after 10 p.m., she could eat any breakfast foods I had on hand, she had to wash any dishes that she used, and she had to teach me something new. So she shared her hummus recipe, I shared my guacamole recipe, and we had a fun night eating our various chips and dips. More and more people came: Koreans, Mexicans, Swiss, French, Swedes, Belgians, Germans, more Americans, Australians, and Spaniards. Each person was remarkably cool, respectful, and grateful to stay with me, and I was happy for their company, curiosity about Chicago, and to learn whatever they had to teach or show me. After we would part ways, they would write a review of me online, and I would write a review of them, thus keeping the system of checks and balances in place, and letting people know that I wasn't a shady weirdo, and letting other hosts know that my guests weren't jerky freeloaders. One of my favorite experiences hosting was with Stefan and Reimar, two German guys traveling across the USA. They arrived around Christmas time and were delighted by the little tree I had put up. They were also completely perplexed when I showed them my German Christmas ornament that I had gotten at the Christkindl market downtown. It was a glass pickle. The label on the ornament said that in Germany, the smallest child in the family got the honor of hanging the pickle on the tree on Christmas Eve. The story caused much consternation between the two, and they dedicated themselves to either debunking the myth or proving it true. It turns out it's only true in one small part of Germany. Besides the pickle debate, the guys were genuinely interested in Chicago and my recommendations for sightseeing and eating in the 2008 presidential election, and many other things. They wrote me the nicest review that I ever got on couchsurfing, and we're still in touch to this day. I'll have more about them later. Pretty much all of my couchsurfing experiences in Chicago were a variation of this. Cool people, cool stories, game for anything, very respectful of me and my home. So when it came time for me to be on the other side of the couch, I also had amazing experiences. During the 2010-2011 school year, I took a leave of absence from LHS to teach English in Mallorca, Spain. Those of you who had had me in class know how very special Mallorca is to me. Couchsurfing in Spain gave me access to a whole social network of people who hosted in the area. I didn't necessarily stay with them, but they would often host dinners in their homes, get-togethers on the beach, and little road trips to explore the island. This group of fun, like-minded people helped me make several quick and lasting friendships in Mallorca that I still cherish to this day. As my time was ending in Mallorca, I made a 6-week plan to tour Spain, Europe, and Morocco before heading home. If you do the math, you guys are going to do math, okay? 6 weeks times 7 days is perfect, 42 days. Okay, I spent 42 days on the road, just me and my backpack, checking out different European cities and even a new continent. One of my proudest accomplishments of that time, I only paid for a hotel for 4 nights. I was able to couch surf the other 38. Southern Portugal is not very well developed for couch surfing, just in case you were wondering. I hung out with the locals in each area, sampled their cuisine, saw their sights, talked about their lives, but the most memorable experience was in a village south of Marrakesh, Morocco, and bordering the Atlas mountain range. My host Jamal and his wife had a villa with several buildings, and I had a building all to myself the time I was there. Jamal spoke good English, but his wife didn't. It didn't matter though, she was fluent in French, and I speak un peu de français. We played checkers all night long, talked about life in the village, food preparations, and their pet cat, I think. She bid me goodnight after a long evening of fun, but sometimes challenging conversation due to our language barriers. As I walked back to my side of the villa, I looked up and I saw a billion stars that seemed to be just out of arm's length. And I remember thinking that I could not believe how insanely lucky I was in that moment. I was in a remote yet beautiful corner of the earth, staying in a home of kind and welcoming people, and sleeping in a room that was free of charge because I was who I was and they were who they were. Sadly, couch surfing is not something that I do anymore. Once you live in the suburbs and have a husband and a dog, logistics aren't quite the same. But I will always have my memories of making the world a little bit better, one couch at a time. Oh, and those German guys, Stefan and Reimar? Well, they helped plan our honeymoon in Munich, Germany. I sent Reimar a list of vacation rentals that I was interested in, and he picked out an amazing apartment for us to stay in. And on the last night of our honeymoon, my husband Jim and Stefan and Reimar and I met up, and they treated us to dinner on the bank of a river. It had only been 8 years since I had last seen them. Thank you.
That was a good story. I like it. You can have a seat on the couch. All right, so we are going to be playing a game. It's called Two Truths and a Lie. 3 teachers are coming out, and 2 of them are telling you a true story. 1 of them is not. And you're going to have to determine, after listening to all 3 of them, who's lying to you. Not that your teachers want to lie to you, but today one of them is. So you're going to have the chance, when they're all done telling their stories, to ask some questions of them to try to determine which of these stories is actually the fake one. So I would like to bring them out right now. Please welcome Mr. Reiff, Mr. McConville, and Ms. Reuben. All right, we have a very scientific way of determining who's going to go first, and that is we flip a chicken. So if the 3 of you could maybe form a little sort of circle, triangle thing. I'm sorry, it's Dr. Reiff. Dang! I didn't, Doc, my apologies. Dr. Reiff. And Dr. Reiff is the one who's going to go first. Mrs. Schoenbeck is always wiping out on the carpet. Her baby is due tomorrow, and if she wipes out on the carpet, it's going to be like, now. So that would be really weird. All right, Dr. Reiff.
All right,
Audience, you need to determine while he's telling the story, do you believe him or not?
All right, hi, everyone. I am going to share a story with you from my youth. I want to warn you, there's some pretty mature content. There's a nightclub and a cop and a fast car and an injury and even a little romance. My story is a tale told in 3 parts. Part 1, way back in 1980-something, I was at that awkward age when I was old enough to vote, to drive, and to serve in the military, but not old enough to get into a nightclub. It wasn't the drinking my friends and I longed for, it was the dancing. I grew up in Chicago, and by the time my friends and I were seniors in high school, we were tired of attending dances on the north side. When we found out about a teen night at a nightclub in a nearby suburb, we started making plans immediately. Teen night meant that we could get into the club, dance all we wanted, drink all the soda we could afford, and then leave before the nightclub transitioned into the over 21 only crowd. We could hardly wait. But first, we had to get there. I had that base covered. My first car, a family hand-me-down, was a beautiful 76 Chevrolet Nova. It was pretty run down when I received it, but it packed a recently rebuilt V8 engine on the inside and sported a fresh coat of midnight blue paint on the outside. I would be the driver for our excursion, and we'd be pulling up to the curb in style. Second, we had to look good. I was more than prepared. I had a bodacious pair of black parachute pants, a slick black members-only jacket, a thin turquoise leather tie, and of course, a pair of white, untied, high-top leather gym shoes that had one four-letter word emblazoned around the back of each heel. Nike. I knew I would be the epitome of style. Dude, I said to my friends, I can't wait for the weekend. Part 2. When Saturday night finally arrived, I drove around the neighborhood picking up my friends. The car was pretty cramped, but none of us minded, until we started to hear a strange sort of knocking sound. We tried to locate the source of the sound, and it seemed to be coming right up through the floor of the car. I decided to pull over and see if I could identify what was loose or about to fall off. I didn't want to drop an exhaust pipe or something in the middle of the road. I laid down next to the car and took a look. I saw a hunk of metal that seemed to be hanging pretty low. I reached out and with the tips of my fingers, tried to give it a little shake to see if it was loose. Now think about that. I reached out and tried to shake it. I have never experienced pain before or since as I did at that moment. It was excruciating. The metal was so hot that my fingers blistered immediately, even though I pulled my hand back almost instantly. Not only was I hurting, but I was intensely embarrassed. I quickly rolled over, staggered to my feet, and cradled my hand with my palm up. Since I couldn't make a fist, I handed the keys to my friend, and we drove to Walgreens, where I bought a hand towel, wrapped my hand, and put burn cream on. Undeterred, we drove to the nightclub. I was not about to let a little setback ruin our evening. However, the bouncer at the door and the policeman beside him had different ideas. We pulled up to the nightclub in my awesome car. I walked to the door in my styling outfit, but the bouncer and policeman wanted to know why my hand was wrapped up. I have a minor burn, but I'm fine, I said. Let's see it, the bouncer insisted. After I unwrapped my hand, the bouncer said, you can't come in here, and the policeman said, son, you have to go to a hospital. I felt this was an overreaction, but my friends convinced me otherwise, and one of them drove me to the hospital. I remember vividly the treatment I received. After examining my injury, the doctor said, you have sustained a second-degree burn. Putting cream on it was the worst thing you could have done. That just seals in the heat. You need to apply ice or cold water and draw the heat out. He placed my hand in a stainless steel bowl filled with cool, clear water. I've never experienced a sense of relief as intense or as soothing before or since that day. He then proceeded to dress my injury. He put gauze between my fingers. He put gauze around my fingers. He spooled gauze around my entire hand and wrapped it until it was the size of cotton candy. I looked like I was wearing a white boxing glove. He instructed me to keep it dry and keep it elevated. So I left the hospital with my elbow bent to the right angle, my hand held aloft as if I was grasping a snow-white bowling ball. All right, part 3. I felt ridiculous, but I was determined to make the most of the evening. I headed back to the nightclub to meet up with my pals. This time, the bouncer and policeman nodded approvingly at my bandage, but I knew that despite my members-only jacket, parachute pants, thin tie, and leather Nikes, I looked silly. I was certain I would be doing no dancing tonight. And yet, while I was at the hospital, my buddies had met a group of girls. And after introductions were made and my sad story told, one of them asked me, would you like to dance? Well, my hand, I feel sort of, but my friends urged me, so I stepped out on the dance floor. Remembering my doctor's advice, I held my hand high and proceeded to bust a move. People nearby grinned, pointed, and giggled, but I kept on dancing. When people started actually laughing, I was just about to call it quits when I noticed my friends dancing their way over to me, their elbows bent at a right angle and their hands wrapped in white cloth napkins and held up high. Pretty soon the DJ saw what was happening and called us out. Everybody, wrap your hands, bend your elbow, hold your hand up high. Everyone started grabbing napkins from the bar and the dining room tables, wrapping their hands, holding them up high, and grooving to the music. I looked at the sea of hands wrapped in white cloth and couldn't believe my eyes. The night didn't go as I'd planned, but it ended up being far more memorable than I could have imagined. I found out later the knocking we heard was a baseball rolling around the trunk, and the car part I tried to shake was the catalytic converter. But what made the night most memorable was not the clothes of the car or the bars. It was the support and encouragement of my friends.
Do you believe him or don't you? We're gonna flip a chicken to see who goes next. Flipping the chicken, we should sing a song about chickens. Flipping the chicken. Mr. McConville is gonna tell you his story now.
My story involves a car and an injury as well. The morning I almost died, or how I got an awesome Halloween costume without buying a mask or using makeup. On October 26, 2010, the morning I almost died, the rain fell hard, the wind blew strong. That morning, my plan had been to drop my kids off at school and head to Kenosha from my home in Ingleside to train for a new job. But before I could drop off the kids, their school called. School was canceled because of the torrential rain had caused flooding. So I called my mother-in-law, packed the kids in the car, and headed to Grays Lake. After getting the kids to their grandparents, out of the car, through the rain and into the house, I thanked my mother-in-law for watching the kids and left Grays Lake for Kenosha, typically an hour's drive. But it was raining, and there was now much more traffic, so I was going to have to hurry to arrive on time. I headed east on Route 120, planning to take Interstate 94 to Kenosha, which would have been fine, but I forgot that there's no entrance ramp to I-94 going north from 120. I only realized my mistake when I couldn't find the ramp to the expressway through the pouring rain. I made the fateful decision to continue east to take US 41 north to the expressway and on to Kenosha. I was starting to worry that I was going to be late. I hate being late. Especially when I had just started a new job. With the stress of being late, the frustration of increased traffic, and the anger directed at myself for making a mistake, I was rushing. In fact, I was driving a little bit too fast for the rainy conditions when I took the ramp to head north on US 41. Part of the problem I faced as I entered the ramp was that its configuration is different than most ramps. Exiting from the right of eastbound 120, the road turns 45 degrees to the right. Encountering this turn on wet pavement, my Jeep Liberty began to slide off the road to the left. Quickly, I turned back to the right, and as my tires regained traction, I headed off the road. Before I could straighten the SUV, I began to experience off-roading for the first time. I was bounced up and down, right and left. I feared that my Jeep was going to roll as the terrain dropped off. I prayed that I would be able to come to a stop, and I slammed down on the brakes. With my heart racing and my hands trembling, the world stopped as the raindrops pounded on the roof, echoing the sound of my heartbeat. I was safe. I paused for a moment and pointed the vehicle back to the pavement. I soon realized that while I was unharmed, the same could not be said for my Jeep. It leaned to the left, and I could hear a thump, thump, thumping as the car moved forward on the road. I pulled over to the left shoulder of the road just as the ramp began its 180-degree turn to merge onto northbound traffic. Upon exiting the car, I realized that the left front tire was flat. I was definitely going to be late now. But thankfully, I thought, at least I know how to change a tire. I took off my jacket and put it down on the wet ground. I was going to be late, but I wasn't going to be muddy. I took out the jack, raised the car, I loosened the lug nuts, and removed the flat tire. As I was about to put on the spare, I heard the sound of screeching tires, immediately followed by the sound of one car impacting another. Instantaneously, the impact threw me to the ground. I saw the sky, then the ground, and the sky, and the ground, and then the underneath of the Jeep. Instinctively, I crawled out as quickly as I could. So much for not getting muddy. As the shock wore off, the pain flooded in. Sharp pain, worse than I had ever felt, shot through my back and side as I began to have difficulty breathing. As I lay there, I heard voices and sirens. Someone asked, "Is there anyone you want contacted?" "Call my wife's school. She's a teacher." Soon the paramedics arrived. I was backboarded, my neck was immobilized. I was put on a stretcher and into the back of an ambulance. The sirens began again as the ambulance moved. Every bump sent shock waves of pain up and down my spine. Meanwhile, the Lake County Sheriff's deputy, who was the first on the scene, was contacting my wife. He told her, "Ma'am, they got him in the bus. He's got a little road rash. They're going to take good care of him." On her way to the hospital, she couldn't process that phrase, road rash. She had no idea that I was outside of the car when it was hit. When I arrived at the emergency of Condell Hospital, there was organized chaos. The doctors and nurses were talking about a woman who just went up to the operating room after arriving in the ER, having been impaled by a tree through her stomach while she was driving. Turns out I might have been in the same place at the same time she was impaled if my kids' school hadn't been closed. Amidst the confusion and chaos, my wife arrived. When she walked into the ER, they were wheeling me off to have a CT scan. She didn't notice me because the neck brace and the rail of the gurney blocked her view of my face. However, she did notice my wedding ring. Then she saw the gravel and dirt that filled in the crevices of the neck brace. My right eye was swollen shut. My left eye was purple. After the CT scan, I was returned to the ER. Soon after returning, the storm knocked out the electricity in the hospital. In order to conserve power while running on backup generators, the lights in the ER were out, except for the monitors that gave off a dim glow. My wife joked, "If it weren't for the accident, it would be kind of romantic." It hurt to laugh. I told her, "No more jokes." The CT scan revealed that I had several fractured ribs, 2 fractured vertebrae, and a partially collapsed lung. I was admitted to the hospital for observation, and I was released 2 days later. Overall, I felt pretty lucky that my injuries were not worse, especially because I could have been impaled by a tree. With all the bruising, cuts, scrapes, and swollen eyes, I went home with a pretty good Halloween costume.
Is he lying to you? Well, you said that about Dr. Reiff. There's only one liar. Maybe it's Ms. Reuben.
All right. Today, I'm going to tell you about the time I climbed a mountain. It was the first time I'd ever been on a legit mountain. And not on something mountain-esque, but a true Lord of the Rings Mount Doom style mountain. The thing is, I didn't plan on climbing this thing. On the morning of the day that I eventually found myself literally on the top of the world, I had no idea that I would be up there looking like down on the clouds. You see, this wasn't just any mountain. This was the Jungfrau, an Alp, a real-life, snowy-peaked, like ginormous, you're in the big leagues now Alp, like the Swiss Alps. In fact, Jungfrau is the tallest summit in the Bernese Alps. It's like 14,000 feet high. And no joke, a plane could probably scrape its belly on this thing if the pilots weren't being careful. And one morning, after a really delicious Swiss breakfast of meat and cheese and bread, I decided to climb Die Jungfrau. So let me tell you about it. But before I do, I should fill in a few pertinent details. I was a junior in college, which for me was a time of impulsive adventure and honestly delusions of my own imperviousness. You see, I was studying abroad in Greece, in Athens, in fact, and my roommate and I decided to go on vacation. By the way, the responsible teacher in me is right now going to tell you that I'm about 80% sure that this was totally okay timing, even if it was right in the middle of the semester. Why Switzerland, you may ask? Well, why not? Honestly, I think the truth is that I've always admired the spelling of that word. I mean, how many words have a W and a Z in them? That could have been the reason, or then again, maybe not. Regardless, we didn't really have much of a plan for our stay. We basically just wandered around like vagrants. Every day we jumped on a train and randomly picked a city to stop in. Now, right now, I know that half of you are impressed, and probably the other half are wondering if I'm crazy. Well, you can tell me at the end of the story. So back to the story. One evening, after a few days of train riding and town hopping, we found ourselves in a perfectly picturesque Swiss town. The sign at the train depot read Grindelwald. And it wasn't until the next day that we realized the scary truth about this beautiful little place. The only, and I mean only, thing to do there is climb mountains. So we climbed a mountain. Armed with only our excitement, we made our way back to the train depot the next morning. We somehow figured out that we needed to arrive at the Kleine Scheidegg Railway, and then even more impressively, we made a transfer over to the Jungfraubahn, and we rode it to its terminus at, Jungfraujoch, which just so happens to be the highest railway station in all of Europe. You really should have seen this train. In fact, we should have probably run as fast as we could away from it, but it chugged along so vertically that we were afraid we were going to start going backwards and seeing the alpine scenery going the wrong direction. Obviously, we made it, or else I wouldn't be here talking to you today about this harrowing tale. But at this point, I have a confession to make. I've misled you. But trust me, I only did so to mimic the way in which we ourselves were misled by Jungfrau. You see, apparently you don't climb mountains there. You ski down them. So let me explain. We disembarked at the station, and we were expecting to see other moderate adventure seekers, maybe some nice alpine paths, really well manicured, and we kind of thought that those paths would lead us to a beautiful, snowy mountain lookout. Maybe there'd be a little coffee bar or a pastry shop with a cute painted sign advertising itself, smoke coming out of the chimney and the smell of delicious pastries drawing in hordes of intrepid travelers. Honestly, if this were the vision that confronted us upon our arrival, my outfit would have made so much more sense. I was wearing brown Doc Martens. The ones I had back then were not the 8-hole, shin height model, but the short version that barely reached your ankles. I also had on a long sleeve shirt, kind of like this one, and a pair of, don't judge, flare leg cords. They were super in at the time. And a wool pea coat, and that's all I had. Everybody else was dressed head to toe in professional ski gear. I'm talking goggles, boots, snow pants, whatever you're supposed to wear on the top of a godforsaken alpine peak. So I ask you, what would you have done in this situation? Turned around and headed right back down? Looked around a bit first? Stopped for a few moments to pick the next place on the map and then hightailed it out of there? Or would you have done what we eventually did? We saw a little ski shop right by the train station. And rooting around through piles of actually useful ski items like ski wax, hats, gloves, ski poles, etc., etc., we found an adorable, tiny, red, 100% plastic snow sled. And it even had a thin little braided cord to pull it around with. In our corduroys and peacoats, we trudged up the mountain with that little red sled in tow. And we proudly stood next to the other people who were on snowboards. We climbed onto the sled, which wasn't even big enough for one adult-sized person. We held on to each other for dear life, and we sled down that mountain.
Do you believe her? You don't believe anybody. You people.
Got it. All right, guys, if you have questions for any of the three and you want to ask a question in order to determine who the liar is, raise your hand and I will find you. Did I say that too scary? Raise your hand and I'll find
Hello?
you.
Dr. Reiff, which hand did you burn?
It was my right hand. Yeah.
Any questions? Jamie,
My question.
where did you stay in Athens?
Never mind.
It was a long time ago.
Did you,
Somewhere in the city,
did you learn any Greek?
Efaristo.
Ooh.
My question is for Magister Reuben. What was your senior roommate's name?
Man, these are hard questions. Her name was, well, my senior or my junior? Because this was when I was a junior in college. Trying to trick me. Her name was Ashley.
Majid,
Yes.
how long did it take you to get down the mountain?
Well, if you factor in how many times we fell off the sled, and then also the amount of times we had to chase the sled, hop back on it, avoid trees, it was a good day.
Mr. McConville, what year did your story take place?
It was 2010.
When did you start working here?
That's a harder question. No, it was 2013.
Okay.
Mr. Reuben, if the sled was too small to fit even one adult, are you implying that it was a kid-sized sled?
100%. Kid size.
For Miss Reuben, where did you go after you went sledding down the mountain?
To the hospital. No, just kidding. We went back to the hotel.
Dr. Reiff, do you remember what song it is that you guys were dancing to? Or any of the songs?
I believe it was the song by Nina with all the balloons, 99 Luftballons.
99 Luftballons, yeah.
Yep. Which was pretty cool because there's all these white gloves and all these balloons were being sung about. So it was pretty cool.
Dr. Reiff, what color were your socks when you burned your hand?
My socks. I believe I was wearing black socks to go with my black parachute pants and my white shoes because that was cool.
Dr. Reiff,
Yes.
can you show us some of those dance moves, please?
No.
All right, that is all the time for questions that we have. However, we need to vote. So, if you believe that Dr. Reiff is our liar, please stand up now. They don't believe you injured your hand like that, Dr. Reiff. All right, sit down. If you believe Mr. McConville is our liar, please stand up now. All right. And if you believe Miss Reuben is our liar, okay, we got a clear winner. All right, take a seat. Will our liar please reveal him or herself? Doc Reiff! Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this show.